This podcast supports fumigators in improving safety, compliance, and solutions. Always follow the federal fumigant label, state and local laws. Licensed fumigators are legally responsible for their applications. And now, on to All Things Fumigation. Out here, we don't just fight pests. We outsmart them. This is All Things Fumigation, where applied science meets real-world grit. I'm John B. Mueller, a fumigator by trade, and your guide to the science of fumigation done right. Each month, we saddle up with the people, the practices, and the precision it takes to keep facilities safe, compliant, and pest-free. Because when you're in the trenches of pest control, you don't need magic, you need science, and maybe a little cowboy spirit. Smarter solutions, safer practices, managed costs. Welcome to All Things Fumigation. Hey, Science Cowboys. Welcome to the next episode of All Things Fumigation. This is the third episode in our series, and the title of this is The Battle is Won Before It is Fought. This is a quote from a 6th century warlord and philosopher Sun Tzu from the writings of The Art of War. And it might seem a little strange that we're choosing a war, but we are at battle with insects. Insects are just trying to stay alive. And if we approach this battle as just a job or a task, the Vegas odds will be on the insect. So we've got to buckle down and we've got to try harder. We want to get into the process of fumigation to understand what we need to do to prepare for success. So if you look at this, the steps in fumigation are plan, prepare, set up, apply or application. We monitor and analyze. We ventilate and clear, and then we review those steps, and hopefully in time and in series. And if everything is done right, that focuses then on success and improved success over time. Now, we're not going to be able to address all of these points. We're going to focus today, just like Sun Tzu said, on planning. When we think about fumigation and planning, when I go into a facility for the first time, my main focal point at that point is temperature. What is the temperature of the facility, and what is the temperature of the commodity? So that then determines concentration and time. We also have buttons and levers that we can draw on once we understand that base foundation of temperature. Now, if you look at this and understand the environmental condition that we're dealing with, we know the higher the concentration, the higher the temperature, the higher the time, or the longer the time, the more successful we'll be. We don't always get to choose that, and even when we can, we need a little help. Temperature is the foundation. It determines concentration and time. Now, with fumigants, we know they're CT products, right? Concentration and time are important. Let's take an example of methyl bromide, which not all of us use. It still is used every day in the United States for import-export purposes. But with regard to methyl bromide, concentration and time relationships are equal. So you can double the concentration and have the time. And it works. Following the label, obviously, that's a pure CT relationship. Now, with the other fumigants like phosphine and sulfurofluoride, it's not a pure relationship. I think of phosphine as an example as little c and a big T. Both concentration and time are important, but time is critically important. And think about it for a second. How long are these phosphine fumigations? They are 3 to 10 days long. Timing is brutally important. But concentration can't be doubled to decrease time. It doesn't work that way. And then transversely with sulfurofluoride, I've had instances where I tried to recover a fumigation in the back half of a sulfurofluoride treatment, and for whatever reason, weather or building condition, and we didn't have success. Even though we hit our CT, we did not have the punch on the front end of the fumigation. So you've got to hit it early and quick. Again, you see that as we build these foundations, as we build these strategies of success, it's very, very important to start with temperature, maximize temperatures, and then that sets the stage for the rest. Now, one thing that I do not like is when people say, well, this fumigant or that fumigant is better in colder temperatures. This is a biological reaction by the insects. It's just more universal, in my opinion. Above 80 degrees is optimal. From 70 to 80 degrees, we start to lose efficacy rate on the egg side. And below 60 degrees, you're going to have serious efficacy challenges on the egg stage. Keep in mind that in most of these dosage ranges, the active stages, adult and larva, are annihilated. Our focal point really needs to be the egg. Now that we've talked about the environmental conditions and setting fumigations up for success, we want to get a little deeper into the analysis. What are we monitoring? What are we taking temperature readings from? I was recently autopsying a failed fumigation. It was a warehouse with commodity, and it was a kind of a defensive situation where the customer was blaming the fumigator was blaming the fumigant on failure. And we sat down, and the first question I asked was, what was the temperature of the treatment? And immediately they were proud, and they said, we warmed this up, like the fumigator said, to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. And then my next question was, well, what was the commodity temperature? And in a very irritating way, they said, well, commodity temperature doesn't matter. It's the temperature of the air, right? The gas is getting into that commodity. And I said, no, the insects are in the commodity. So we need to monitor, we need to know the temperature where the biological reaction occurs. So right away, you saw the facial expressions of the customer start to weigh a little bit. And that was it. The commodity temperature was 55 degrees, and they chose the convenient temperature to set the dosage range, and really not where the impact of the treatment was. So we not only need to understand the temperature of the lowest point, we're looking for worst case scenario. And that is our standard. What's the temperature of the commodity? And then what is the concentration within that commodity? We need to be monitoring our gas concentrations, not in the open air, not where it's easy to achieve good concentration, but in those hard and difficult areas where the insects are. So, look at this relationship. The relationship between the fumigator and the customer, or the fumigator and the site manager, this has to become a partnership. The fumigators can't just do this alone. They need the facility cooperation to develop these environmental conditions that put us at an advantage. And they need to be educated, explain, and start to develop that partnership and collaboration, because there's more through this process where we're going to lean on that customer. And we want to identify roles and responsibilities, what they can be doing the week or weeks in advance for a fumigation to start to bring that temperature up, bring that commodity temperature up, start to do other things that we're going to get into a little later into this podcast. Now, before we do that, we want to take a quick break. We'd like for you to take a few seconds here and follow us on your podcast platform. We'd like you to leave us a rating, tell your friends, follow us on LinkedIn. There's a lot of chatter regarding fumigation on LinkedIn, and I find it to be a really good conversational platform for us. And then if you want to dig a little deeper on the fumigation company, you can go to thefumco.com. That's THEFUMECO.com. So we talked a little bit about environmental conditions and how that guides us from a concentration choice or a dosing choice to the duration that we set for the fumigation treatment. There's another environmental condition that's not talked about very much, but is critical to the success of a fumigation, and that's population density. The number of insects that we find when we come into some of these facilities, really, let's be honest, can be overwhelming. Do you ever wonder what the impact of these large numbers are to these field or fumigations that we provide? You know, when I walk into a facility, I wonder that a lot. And I look at it this way. If, as I'm walking around and doing some preparation for a treatment, and I'm seeing hundreds or thousands of adult beetles, let's say, walking around, how does that equate to the entire metamorphic process that we have at this facility? So if you're seeing hundreds or thousands of adults walking around, what about how many eggs are there? How many larvae? How many pupa? This is exponential to what you're visually seeing in a short period of time. So what are those numbers? Can they be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions? The answer is absolutely yes. And if our attitude is see bug kill, we failed right there. We have to understand what our efficiencies are. So our efficiencies start with managing environmental conditions, raising the temperature, choosing the proper dosage rate, choosing the proper duration. But what are those efficiencies? Now, most fumigations and most fumigators can agree that 90 to 98% efficiency is what is the best we can do in the field. There are too many variables out there that generate survival. And like I said earlier, we're annihilating the active stages, the adults and the larvae. It's the egg that's the problem. So when we talk about survival, it's generally in those very young eggs that have just been dropped. And that's where our mortality slip occurs. Now, if we've got 10,000 bios in that fumigated space, and we're 94% effective, that's 600 eggs that will emerge after that fumigation. Now, if you're seeing adults after a fumigation, that's a dismal failure of a fumigation. Adults should be dead within hours of gas release. So we are focused on eggs. So 10,000 bios, 600 survivors. But if we've got 100,000 insects in there and we're 94% effective, that's 6,000. That's not what the customer wants to see. It's not what we want to see. And if we've got 1 million insects, that's 60,000 survivors after that treatment. So now we can start to form a real vision of what the impact of population density is coming into a fumigation. And this is the fumigator's opportunity to, again, educate the customer or the site manager on how to set these fumigations up for success. What causes high population density? Lack of effective cleaning, failed IPM programs. Sometimes we get infestation straight out of the fields, depending on the commodity and the geography that we're dealing with. Universally, it's waiting too long to fumigate. It's saying, hey, we don't have time to do this right now. We need this downtime for something else. We'll push it to the next holiday. Or grain merchandisers that say, hey, look, we don't know what we're going to do. Let's just wait a couple of months before we treat this commodity. Well, waiting is the opportunity for the pest, and it's also a formula for failure. Structural harborages are another point to be made, and then ingredient suppliers. I've seen beautiful facilities that were completely adulterated by ingredient that came in infested. These are the considerations. This is what we're looking for. These are the discussions that we're having with these customers as we educate them to what impacts population density and how we can lower that pressure. And this is a great example of not only the importance of managing population density, but also us as fumigators driving fumigation performance. We talked about 94% efficacy, but as we drive that improved performance, look at what happens with a 98% efficacy. This is what they're expecting to see in best case scenario. If you think about it, waiting too long to fumigate will breed fumigation dependence. It's going to drive higher treatment costs, greater risk to reputation. These are all customer impact. But from a fumigator standpoint of driving performance, not managing environmental conditions have the same impact as the above. So waiting too long, again, breeds fumigation dependence, higher treatment costs, and greater risk to reputation. So again, this is why we're talking about partnerships. So the message that I'd like for you to take from this podcast is plan, and plan as far ahead as you can. One of the most difficult fumigations I ever experienced in my life, we started planning 4 months in advance. And every time I got nervous about this job ahead of us, I went back into planning and kind of vented my nervous energy towards that. And we had a fantastic outcome. And I worked with the team too. We all had roles and responsibilities as part of that planning process. And then partnering with the site. In that instance, we had a fantastic partner. They listened to what we needed. They did it. It was a good cooperation. And together we drove an unbelievable effectiveness beyond what they imagined as reasonable. We know fumigation is applied science. We want you to be a science cowboy, apply the science, and protect your product. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast app, remember that you can watch us on YouTube. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, where we've got some great conversations going on around the science of fumigation. And if you want to get into deep discussions around fumigation, go to thefumco.com. Tell your friends and coworkers, and please leave us a rating. Until next time, Science Cowboys, I am John B. Mueller, and this is All Things Fumigation.